while Democratic enthusiasm remains high. The party leads in the generic congressional ballot. I think about 7% is the average number of the lead for Democrats right now. But a recent report from McClatchy cautions nervous Democrats ask, could Election Day disaster strike again? Here now, Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com, just finished 4 weeks of election specials on Fox News. Ben, good to see you as always. Thanks for being here tonight. You've been looking at this very closely over the past few weeks. Do you think that their fears are justified?
Well, I mean, certainly there's a reason to be afraid. There are some polls that came out in battleground districts showing that Republicans were running basically even with Democrats in an enormous number of battleground districts. Those, of course, would be the districts that were very competitive between President Trump and Hillary Clinton. The map looks to me as though the red areas are getting redder and the blue areas are getting bluer and the purple areas are getting more purple. So what that suggests is that this is not going to be a walk in the park for Democrats the way that Democrats thought it was going to be even a few weeks ago. And I'm not sure that leading into a heavily contested midterm election, you want your going away message to be, we don't like due process with Justice Kavanaugh, and also we're not really sort of Native American with Elizabeth Warren. Those don't seem like two great takeaway messages.
You know, it's also interesting to me that they are very fired up about the Electoral College and about the fact that every state gets to send 2 senators to the United States Senate. And that tells me that they're worried that, you know, as they look forward in history, it doesn't look good for them, the composition of the country.
Well, certainly not in the Senate and also in the Electoral College, because, again, states are slightly outweighing population centers in the Electoral College. Democrats, it was very funny. After 2016, we kept hearing over and over from Democrats who thought Hillary was going to win that President Trump needed to accept the results of the election. So far, we have heard from Democrats since 2016 that we should change the constituency of the Senate, abolish the Supreme Court, abolish the Electoral College, and abolish ICE. So I get the feeling that acceptance isn't in the cards anytime soon here.
All right. Well, you know, Hillary Clinton is obviously spending a lot of time back in the limelight again, which is raising questions about whether or not she's potentially even considering running again. There was one op-ed that was arguing that she might, you know, that 3 times might be the charm for Hillary Clinton. She also, you know, is getting probably more attention than some Democrats would like at this juncture in the election with comments like this. Let's watch this.
In retrospect, do you think Bill should have resigned in the wake of the Monica Lewinsky scandal?
Absolutely not.
It wasn't an abuse of power?
No. No.
There are people who look at the incidents of the 90s and they say a president of the United States cannot have a consensual relationship with an intern. The power imbalance is too great.
Who was an adult.
She was an adult. She didn't seem to like that line of questioning, and I can't say I really blame her. It's pretty uncomfortable. She was an adult, is her argument for the pre-Me Too experience of Bill Clinton.
Well, I definitely am enjoying watching the goalposts move at light speed around the field, thanks to Democrats deciding that consent does have power relationships attached, or it doesn't have power relationships attached. Perjury is sometimes good, sometimes fibbing about sex is bad. It seems to depend on the day, and mostly it depends on whom they are defending. So Hillary Clinton making life a nightmare once again for her Democratic colleagues who must be wishing at this point that they could somehow wish her into the cornfield.
All right. I do want to get your thought on this because it just broke tonight. This is Michael Avenatti will now have to pay President Donald Trump's legal fees for the Stormy Daniels case, which just fell apart. Here's the quote from President Trump's attorney on this. He says, "No amount of spin or commentary by Stormy Daniels or her lawyer, Mr. Avenatti, can truthfully characterize today's ruling in any way other than total victory for President Trump and total defeat for Stormy Daniels." Rough couple of weeks for Michael Avenatti, Ben.
Well, Michael Avenatti, who was my entertaining frontrunner for 2020, I was really looking forward to Michael Avenatti making a play in the Democratic primaries. I have to say that at this point, Michael Avenatti is as much of a good lawyer as Elizabeth Warren is a Native American.
I mean, he was campaigning as early as this weekend in South Carolina. It will be interesting to see. And, you know, you did call for it, I think, on this show when he first got on the scene, saying that you really hoped he would run for president, Ben.
I did, and I still do, because this is highly, highly entertaining stuff. But again, he has won 1,024th of a decent lawyer, because this was not a good case to bring in the first place, and now he's been humiliated a couple of times in 3 weeks.
20 seconds, but do you think that the Harvard case will overturn affirmative action?
You know, I would like to see it do so, but again, Harvard is a private institution, not a public institution. At the very least, Harvard is wildly hypocritical for talking about diversity while banning essentially Asian students.
Ben Shapiro, always a pleasure. Great to see you, Ben. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So coming up next, the end of an era in America as generations goes bust.
So Sears Roebuck, when I was growing up, was the big deal. Somebody that is of my generation, Sears Roebuck was a big deal. So it's very sad to see. So Sears Roebuck, when I was growing up, was the big deal. Somebody that is of my generation, Sears Roebuck was a big deal. So it's very sad to see.
You heard the president. Sears, the store whose business model in many ways reshaped the country, especially rural America, giving them access to things they didn't have access to before that, said today they will file for bankruptcy. They're closing 142 stores by the end of the year. That news, not much of a surprise in a world that revolves around e-commerce, but that wasn't always the case. Ask anybody over the age of 30, and they probably have a story about a trip to their local Sears or getting that big fat catalog in the mail and picking out Christmas toys or even a new refrigerator. It was founded in 1892, and it became famous for connecting rural shoppers to the goods that they had in the big city, basically. Brands like Kenmore and Craftsman Tools. Back in the day, it was a staple on network TV.
Put an end to traffic fears. It's very easy to get to Sears.
With Sears 19-inch color TV, you get a lot more than one button color.
There's more for your love.
Starwalt takes a trip with us down memory lane. Hi, Chris.
Howdy, ma'am.
What did Sears mean to you, sir, growing up in West Virginia?
I remember when I was a young reporter, Robert C. Byrd, his eminence, when he was on the campaign trail, he said, there's three things West Virginians can count on. Carter's Little Liver Pills, the Sears and Roebuck Company, and Robert C. Byrd. And we scoffed. We thought it was pretty corny, young reporters. But you know what? For a lot of the older folks listening to him, he was not far off. Because if you lived in a remote part of the United States, if you lived in a holler in Raleigh County, West Virginia, that catalog was your connection to the American promise in a lot of ways. And then Sears did it again. They revolutionized it two times. Once they kept rural America connected to the fast-growing urban America and what was going on there. But then, after World War II, their competitors thought that we were going to be in a deep recession, that the Depression was really still there lurking behind everything. But you know what they did? They invested huge sums, took a giant bet on what would eventually become the malls that we know. They remade American retail again because they went out into the sticks, they went out into the suburbs, they planted the flag and built these big stores and changed everything a second time. And I tell you what, as part of my life, especially growing up where I grew up, the Sears catalog was a big deal.
Yeah, you know, and when you think about it, and I didn't know until I read today that hundreds of thousands of houses were built from Sears kit boxes, essentially. Oh, yeah. And some of those neighborhoods still exist. But when you think about it, they were the Amazon of their day, or the Walmart before Amazon of their day, because they brought all of this access to places where they just had such limited access in the little shops that they might have on their main street.
They didn't have any little shops on the main street. In my grandfather's hometown, they had one general store, and there was not a lot of choice. Now, he, of course, claimed that before the Charmin bears got into the woods, that they even used the used catalogs in the outhouse. So I don't know that Amazon will ever be able to live up to that promise. I don't know if they'll ever do that.
I don't know if we'll ever be able to get that image out of our heads, but you know.
Times are tough. But Amazon is doing now what Sears did before. That's the way. That's the way the world goes.
It's like, you know, the horse and buggy, and it is. It's sad, and it is definitely the end of an era. But they were $5.5 billion in debt. You know, as a business reporter, I watched Sears try to reinvent itself over the past 20 years so many times, and it was just impossible, sadly.
When you get to that kind of debt, you're talking about federal government debt. Only the government is allowed to rack up debt that big.
And unfortunately, they were not deemed too big to fail, apparently,
right.
Because the government did not sweep in and get them. It just, I mean, we do live in such a different world now. I mean, Amazon, it's almost like, people who use the Sears catalog to buy things that they, couldn't get. Now everybody buys everything on Amazon. It's just, I wonder if Amazon will go bankrupt, when our kids are grown up.
One day somebody will invent something better than Amazon, and then they'll go bankrupt, and then my grandkids can come on to television or whatever place of television and talk about my dad used to go on Amazon, and he tipped the buy now thing. It was adorable.
All right. Thanks for the catalog multi-use. Chris Darwell.